It's the beginning of the beginning. David Rubenstein was on CNBC today, and David Rubenstein, for those of you guys don't know, was a co-founder of Carlyle Group. More blue chip and blue blooded you cannot get, and very connected in Washington. And he said it best, where he said, effectively, the people want this, and the government will have no choice except to support it, because you can't take something like this with this much institutional and retail demand away. So we have to go to the place where now crypto needs to be like everything else. And maybe the crypto stands get upset with that because they don't like it that, a bunch of their parents are all of a sudden going to be buying tokens and stuff, but they got to get over it. And this stuff should be, transacted in the same way you transact anything else. You buy it, you sell it, you get a tax return, you pay your taxes, and you move on.
This reminds me of the transition that we all went through with, I don't know if you remember Kazaa and Napster and BitTorrent. Like everybody, a lot of our contemporaries in their 30s, 10, 20 years ago were like, you can't stop it. You can't stop it. And it got stopped. Like you made it illegal and you prosecuted people. And then you came up with solutions that were regulated, like Spotify or Netflix, and you gave the consumers what they wanted. So David, do you think this is a similar path right now that we're going through, which is the crypto zealots and the stands are going to basically have to get used to, as Chamath's saying, their parents buying it, and crypto not being this underground thing, but being regulated in a major way in the United States? And is that a good or bad thing?
I think the thing that's happening quietly behind the scenes is that major Wall Street players, institutions, endowments, and so forth, over the past year have decided that Bitcoin and crypto is a legitimate asset class, and they've been allocating to it. Huge pools of capital, balance sheet capital, have been allocating into it. I don't think that's going to change. This is probably a pretty good buying opportunity. We've seen these crashes in Bitcoin many times over the years. It plummets down and then it goes back up, and it eventually goes back up and reaches a new peak. So this is probably a pretty good entry point for the next rally. We don't know when that's going to be. But the whole point of Bitcoin is that it's censorship resistant. And China can do its best to try and stamp it out, but I don't think they'll be successful at that.
You don't? You're so wrong about that. That is the most naive take, worst take you've ever had.
How's China going to stop Bitcoin?
How do they stop VPNs? They put people in jail. How do they stop religion? They put people in jail.
They may make it incredibly hard for Chinese citizens to get a hold of Bitcoin. I agree with that, but they're not going to be able to stop Bitcoin.
They're not going to stop Bitcoin in the West, but they will stop it in China. 100% full stop. And you know how many servers are in China? Go talk to the people who were in Tiananmen Square about what happened.
The miners will have to move out. Miners
are done. And then if it'll be an underground thing, like it'll be like having a VPN, which is 5 years in jail for selling VPNs.
What do you think about the IRS requirement that you have to report any Bitcoin transaction over $10,000? Do you think that and Americans can be prosecuted for not reporting, right? So I don't know how much.
Fine.
Good.
So what?
Do it.
So
yes. What? Get over it.
But I do think that will get rid of 20% of the transactions that might have been nefarious.
This is the Silk Road fallacy that, that the only legitimate use for crypto are...
Well, I said 20%. I didn't say only.
Okay, fine. But so maybe it makes that small fraction of illegitimate or illicit use cases.
What do you think, Freeberg?
No, Sachs, I think the point is that they're trying to chase down. It's not about illegal use cases. It's about not reporting a taxable gain on your Bitcoin before you use that money to buy something. So
of course, it's about tax evasion. But look, but that's not going to stop Bitcoin usage. Smart people who've been trading Bitcoin have been paying taxes on it for years. I don't think that's really an issue. If you were in China and you had created your wealth in China or many other countries all over the world, and there were currency restrictions and controls, and the government was asserting more and more power, and we're putting business leaders under house arrest and seeking to put them under their thumb, you'd be trying to convert as much of your net worth into Bitcoin as possible, so that all you have to do is, if you ever had to flee the country, you wouldn't have to have dollars in your suitcase or gold bricks or diamonds. You'd simply have to have a password in your brain that you could access at any computer terminal when you got out of the country. And so I think that sort of digital gold is a phenomenal use case of Bitcoin. And the more oppressive all these countries become, the more they increase the value of that use case.
What do you think is the black swan event in crypto, in Bitcoin in particular?
Taxation in the United States, a 10%
there's
additional taxation like you do on cigarettes. That would be for me. The United States putting a tax on it that makes it less competitive with our national coming cryptocurrency. The CBDC that the United States will launch in the next 2 or 3 years, they're going to say, if you want to use any of these other currencies, there's a 10% tax on them. We want you using ours, the legitimate one.
There's a very negative black swan that obviously has never occurred. But if anyone ever manages to counterfeit a Bitcoin, or this is the double spend problem, right? If you could ever double spend or figure out a way to create Bitcoins or counterfeit them, whatever, that weren't in the blockchain, if the number of Bitcoins ever grew beyond the 21 million that's just built into the way that the whole thing works, if that ever happened, Bitcoin is instantly worthless. That would be the black swan on the negative side. I think the black swan on
how could that, if it didn't happen in the first 11 years, what do you think the likelihood on a percentage basis that it happens in the 20th?
Exactly.
It's too expensive now, and it's too visible. Like the way that it would have happened in the first 2 or 3 years.
Or the argument could be made the opposite, that now it's so valuable that it's worth investing to figure out
it's a bigger target. Yeah.
And rather than have it be about a diminishing probability, it could be an increasing probability over time, which is that the pathways to get there start to get resolved, whereas in the past you didn't have enough time to resolve those pathways. I'm speaking highly theoretical here, but like certainly there's a lot of
that doesn't take into account that it's open source and that everybody can see it. So you would think that everybody would discover the vulnerability at the same time, right? In an open source project.
Well, no, I think the issue, practically speaking, in this would be that you would see those resources getting organized, meaning you'd see silicon being bought in volume by some centralized player, and then you'd have to see water and power come together as well. And this is where I think it's just not realistic, where today that I think the horse has left the barn, because if you try to basically capture enough hash rate to kind of like overpower this network, it's like the scene in Austin Powers where he's screaming in front of a steamroller, but the steamroller is moving at like 1 foot a minute.
Right. You see it coming.
It's just like you just see it coming.
Well, would you have a black swan, Friedberg? You asked a loaded question, so do you have one?
I think about it a lot. I mean, it's a black swan. It's because it's a black swan. So you don't really see it coming. But like, you know, the thing about Bitcoin, which has always given me pause, is the fact that the only way it works is if everyone believes that more people are going to believe in it tomorrow than believe in it today.